The AI wave is coming. There is no question of it. It's like an inevitable one. If you are not thinking strategically, which is like, hey, what is the strategic value that I'm bringing to the table, you will be very quickly replaced. And in order to answer this, I know I'm use the word strategy quite a lot because of my McKinsey experience, which is you don't have to complicate within my own team what's my value. And across all my multiple years in my career, what are the things that I have done which places me unique in terms of the positioning. And with AI coming in, if you are not in the top 1 percentile or top 20 percentile, you will be easily replaced. It's not AI which will replace, but it's clearly the expert, whoever is in the field, will be able to do 10 people's job. So AI will not replace you, but the person who is able to multiply his or her capability and his or her deliverable scope will actually replace you because they can do like more things with the less time. Ahead and be always think of what's the strategic positioning that you have compared to anyone else, which is if you are easily replaceable, probably you're not doing the right stuff. If you are not working on stuff where you can hands down say that, hey, I am the top expert in this field, bring me anyone, I can beat them in these concepts or in this understanding, you are probably not going to get that. So for me, whenever I used to have that feeling, I always used to say like, hey, oh, I am probably doing very good in like competition. So I have like some kind of global presence that, hey, I can prove that I'm very good expert here. I can speak the language, which probably I'm at very better communicator in terms of a typical standard data scientist. And hey, I can also do a lot of process management and change management like a typical McKinsey consultant. So those are the things that while in India, we are not taught a lot about celebrating things, which is this is like a very funny story that every time whenever you actually have a conversation with any of Indian reports, they always think of like, hey, what can I improve? Hey, what can I improve? They are only in that improvement scope, but they actually have to step back and actually celebrate things like, hey, I actually did achieve a lot of things. The things that I ship have created multi-million dollar impact. So reason why that you are spending your time across like any workplace environment, be strategic about like how do you want to allocate your time. It's almost similar to how you do your financing, saying like, hey, this is your salary. Half of it should go to EMIs or house rents and stuff. 30% should go to somewhere else, and 20% is going to investment. So for me, it's always the same thing, which is when you're actually at a workplace, you will have to carve out like 70% is your BAU, which is like you do your work from your manager or something that needs so that your year-end performance is there. The 30% of it is where you can actually be more creative, where for me, I would break that 30% as 20% is purely in terms of relation building. The percentages will change based on your level and the nature of the work that you're doing, but directionally, this is where I would say, where there is like your core work and there is the work that you will have to be investing for your future, where a good portion of chunk is purely relationship building, which is with your senior people on what's going on so that you know what's happening in the organization, and relationship with your friends and peers who are doing similar stuff but in a different set from what your leaders will be saying.
Hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of Professionals Unplugged. I am your host Utkarsh. Today we have Omar with us. Omar, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you, Utkarsh. It's nice to be here.
So let's start with a very basic question. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience, like who you are, what work you do, anything you want us to know about you?
Cool. So my name is Omar. I am a VP of Analytics Solutions at JPMorgan, where currently I'm helping how we can scale AI solutions across the organization. And before that, I was working with Amazon, McKinsey, where the story that I would tell is I'm more like jack of all trades, where you wear multiple hats because consulting world actually teaches you that. And apart from that, I also immigrated to US. So that's like a touch point that I want to share more about. And cumulatively everything, it's like I talk about AI, immigration, and also a little bit of life lessons in terms of how do you plan more strategically.
And that's a very brief intro, right? So as you mentioned, you are being a consultant and being consulting like McKinsey, Amazon, and now Goldman, right? So
JP Morgan,
JP
yeah.
Morgan, yeah, sorry, JP Morgan, right? So it's been all of three are like kind of a different. Like Morgan is more towards banking, McKinsey was consulting, AWS is own domain on its own, right? So how do you enter this consulting market? Because sometimes it's very difficult for engineers, especially, right, to convert themselves into consultant, right? Because the role gets wider, right? So can you just enlighten us on your journey, like the starting, how the inception happened?
Of course. I think for me, I would make my consulting shift as one of the key shifts in my entire life, entire professional journey, where my first work after my college is like I started as a software engineer with Verizon, where within the first 6 months, I figured out probably I can do like much better in terms of other aspects rather than like just purely software engineering. So that's when I actually thought like, hey, let's do something on analytics and so on and so forth. And that's when I started analytics. And once I got into analytics, I got into a lot of competitions, doing all these Kaggle stuff and so on and so forth. And for me, McKinsey was my dream job because the thing that which keeps me super excited is about problem solving, the math behind it, and how do we tell like a good business story and solve business problems. So for me, McKinsey was more like my goal after I do my MBA. So luckily, McKinsey was a surprise where McKinsey did like a India-wide hackathon.
Mhm.
I got into like the top 30 of the hackathon, and then with a series of interviews, I cracked the McKinsey round. While getting into consulting was like purely from this competition, the entire game of consulting is like super duper different than a typical product company. The fundamental shift that I had to think through is in a typical product organization, you will always be given work. When you say given work, your manager will figure out like what you want to do. So like, hey, do this, do that, and so on and so forth. In consulting, it's completely opposite, where you have to pull your work, which is, hey, I am interested in this work. Who are the people who are working on this? Let me talk to them. Let me build connections and let me get into that. So while entry of it purely happened from that competition, the changes that I have to go through as part of McKinsey was huge, and it's a complete different ballgame. And for me, I would say anyone who is actually trying to transfer from one side to another side, that's the first thing that I would say. Like, hey, in consulting, first point is like make sure you are like much more open-ended, which is there will be a lot of change because every project is different, every client is different, every conversation might lead to something different. So have a more open mind in those conversations. The second one is the biggest one, which is like the pace at which you work will be very different. I know, I'm pretty sure like you might have already heard the stories from other people, which is one meeting with a senior leader, the entire direction changes, which in a typical product organization, that is very rare, where you're like very systematic, saying like sprint this, next sprint we are doing this, where things are more structured. So you have to be more agile in terms of consulting. And third one is you have to be like super communicative because the number of things that you will be dealing with will be like massive, where you have things coming from your clients, where you will have things coming from your leadership, your own leadership, and where things like you are interested in. So in a way, you will have to juggle all these three things of having a good balance and having explicit communication with all the different stakeholders.
Yeah, I guess there is one very important point that you mentioned, like we need to keep ourselves open for anything coming, right? So there is one thing that comes to everyone's mind, like how you keep yourself updated as well as how you try to maintain the work-life balance. Because as a consultant, you said like you need to connect with various people from the organization and get the work done, and at the same time need to keep yourself updated as well, right? So what's the secret of it?
I think one is I don't think there's like one fit for all. It's like everyone will have to figure out their own sweet spot. Uh, the thing which is pretty fascinating is always be strategic, is what I would say. When you say like always be strategic, is when you are spending your time across like any workplace environment, be strategic about like how do you want to allocate your time. It's almost similar to how you do your financing, saying like, hey, this is your salary. Half of it should go to EMIs or house rents and stuff. 30% should go to somewhere else, and 20% is going to investment. So for me, it's always the same thing, which is when you're actually at a workplace, you will have to carve out like 70% is your BAU, which is like you do your work from your manager or something that needs so that your year-end performance is there. The 30% of it is where you can actually be more creative, where for me, I would break that 30% as 20% is purely in terms of relation building. The percentages will change based on your level and the nature of the work that you're doing, but directionally, this is where I would say, where there is like your core work and there is the work that you will have to be investing for your future, where a good portion of chunk is purely relationship building, which is with your senior people on what's going on so that you know what's happening in the organization, and relationship with your friends and peers who are doing similar stuff but in a different setup. For example, your friends or colleagues who are doing like research, let's say you have colleagues in Google and Facebook who are doing a little bit more things in a similar AI domain, probably different. That's like a good touch point. And the third most important thing is also like having good collaboration with your juniors, because the perspective that they might be coming will be like very different from what your leaders will be saying. So have those conversations, like uh, relationships are like a really good one to engage in. And the third one is just scroll up stuff. I generally look at a lot of X, Twitter, for what's happening in the market. You generally get a good gist of how market is going. At times, you might see the repetitive content. I'm thinking of building like an AI solution to synthesize some news, some information for me. But yeah, everyone can actually consume their news differently. But that's the way how I kind of keep an open mind and keep track of trends.
That's really nice. I think dividing your time and taking it as how you deal in your life, right? That's a really great example. You touched base on AI, right? And you said like in your current role, you are building the AI thing for Morgan, right? So I have been in banking industry for now more than 2.5 years, right? And there is a big struggle for AI to getting introduced in banking, especially for customers when it's come to their PI data, right?
Mhm.
So how are you dealing with this problem, or how is the AI getting used in the banking domain for you?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, which I have to unwind in like multiple stages. So the first question before getting into the details of it is more around like, one, is AI hype, or is AI is actually making like a needle moving difference? I would say there is a good chunk of like probably 20 to 30% where AI is actually being used in production environment and it's actually making things like super better. And there is like 80% of the place where 70 to 80%, which is like AI is in PowerPoint decks where you have a bunch of use cases, which is like a good theoretical exercise so that investments keep on coming in. So for me, I feel like the 20% of AI, wherever it's getting into production, I feel that pie will increase as we go, where AI is actually removing the barrier, removing the entry barrier. So everything that you see about vibe coding, everything that people are saying, like, hey, let me quickly run like a prototype or do some quick stuff. AI will actually make everyone to reach from 0 to 60 or 0 to 70 very quickly. In a matter of minutes or in a matter of hours, you will actually become expert of that industry. As long as you are like thinking first principle, you will know essentially the big stuff that happens. The main challenge that comes is how you're moving that 70% of your knowledge to 100% of your knowledge, which is essentially the biggest investment. And for typical banks, this is even more high bar, because let's say if you are in a Amazon setup, you make mistakes. you iterate in second version, you will fix it and you will slowly improve it. Where the bar might be still you are like your own bar, versus in a regulatory environment, if you make a mistake, you will get fined, you will get dinged very badly. So the bar is pretty high. And the way how currently across like different banks, I mean, not just like my own organization, but even outside, uh, the way how we are currently doing it is wherever there is like a human in loop, there is like super acceleration going on. For example, agentic coding or generating new decks, automating a lot of the document creations. That is happening as long as there is a human owner to that. So that's the quick part where we are kind of enabling and accelerating stuff. The second piece where getting into the agentic AI use cases, I think this is a big place which I don't think anyone will actually solve in a click of a button, but rather you have to invest in a lot of structural information, which is nothing but the entire discussion that currently the market is talking about, like context management, where a typical context management should have like multiple things across the system, which is like, hey, do I know enough information to answer this question? And is that information right information or wrong information? Just giving an example, it's more like, let's say if you are making a transaction, if you're if there is like a random transaction for Utkarsh is sending money to Umar, the AI needs to know if this is like a true transactions or not. It can look at purely saying like, hey, is Umar, Utkarsh are friends? Okay. Did this happen in the past? Yes. And let's say if it's not Omar Saleem, but it's actually Umar something else. So we need to identify that human, who is that person, what's the relationships and what's the nuances. So for this, the infrastructure of that context management layer, that's like the big piece where a lot of banks have started to invest, which we will see in the next coming years, which is the model will change, but the infrastructure or the metadata that we are building will be the main key to answer that problem.
So mostly towards payment side, right? Or is there any customer use case as well that you think can happen in, especially in banking domain?
In banking, I feel like, I mean, this is more like my perspective, nothing coming from like my organization, but I feel banking is going to go through a huge transformation. When I say huge transformation, which is like almost everything that currently banks do from a regulatory point of view, you have hundreds of frontline workers. You have hundreds of people from a regulatory standpoint of view. You have thousands of people doing all these individual operations. I feel all of this will get automated or at least like automated at the highest potential. And for use cases, at least for JPMorgan Chase, because we have a huge Chase travel, I can actually have a conversation with my Chase Travel saying like, hey, by the way, I want to book a vacation in Utah for next week. Please confirm that. If I just make this like one single line, the agent should actually understand like, hey, Umar is asking for this in Utah.
Hmm.
Umar is a Bonvoy member, so let me find like Bonvoy tickets. Umar is currently staying in like probably New York City. Let me find the flights from here to New York City. Umar works in JPMorgan, where he typically travels on Friday evening. Let's get that information. So in a way, that's like the vision where you have to have all this metadata context management store of individual, of customer behavior, of all the connections that needs to be done. Once all this thing layer is kind of done, the LLMs, whether that is like GPT-5 or Claude 4.7, the model can change, but this stack will remain the same. That's the place where we are kind of invested right now.
Yeah, I think that's completely sensible thing that we can do at this point. And talking about the challenges, right? So what were the biggest challenges that you have faced in professional or personal life that you can share?
Yeah, I would say for me, anything that is like a broad question like this, like challenges or opportunities, I always go back to my personal angle. And for me, the biggest challenge is always like the cultural angle. When I say cultural angle, it's actually at multiple levels. I already touched base this in the previous question, which is like cultural challenge from moving from product organization to a consulting organization, which is like a complete mindset shift of where you have to pull work and you have to build your own brand for it was like a complete different transition. And for me, I feel like the second biggest challenge that I would say is more around like migrating from India to US, while the traditional path is always like, hey, let's do masters and let's find H1B and let's move. That's like a good is, I would say, like it's still complex route, but it's in a way easier route because when you are actually going to college, you will be having a lot of network. You're starting with a lot of friend base. But let's say if you're actually moving on an L1 where you're just shifting places, but in a way, I have to rebuild all my friends around the new area. I have to figure out everything from a cultural aspects. Where in India, you can get things done if you know the right people. Whereas in US, you will have to figure out the systems, the processes, and everything. And then the biggest thing is also your sponsorship network. And along with sponsorship network, the biggest question is when you go on an L1, your entire uh, livelihood is actually depend on one company, which is like if my organization didn't wanted me or if they feel like the performance is like not what they want, I'm like screwed. I will have to go back all the way to India again. So that puts a different pressure altogether. It's more like how do you have a balance of these all these things together, and how do you slowly transition from being in a direction of uh, only work focus towards having like a holistic one. I felt that like that's like one of the thing which I'm super thankful for a lot of people who were in the company who went the same routes to help me navigate those situations. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest challenge to get yourself up, and you need to be perform at the same time at the new company and get everything settled, right? So is this thought always in your mind, even at your early stage, right? What if the performance goes, or what if anything happens wrong with the company, right? Is this something that you get nervous of or sometimes?
No, I think it does, right? It's more like syndrome, where you always try to see like, hey, am I good enough or what goes in? Especially at the beginning of the year, I mean, at the beginning of my career, when in my first couple of years, I actually didn't feel much of that. Uh, I felt I was like probably too much comfortable, to be honest. Because starting your career with a product organization, especially like Verizon, which is like purely genuinely invested in like having like a good work-life balance, I felt probably I was not pushed enough. And that's when I jumped ship to McKinsey, and McKinsey threw me off into a lot of into a pool of where I don't know how to swim. So that was like a real challenge plus opportunity, because right now, if I'm able to speak the business language with the rigor and with the depth, where any concept that you throw at me, I can actually do like first principle thinking and I can easily answer and become like an expert in like a quick turnaround. That I feel like McKinsey is there, where the biggest point is when you are in that environment, when I was in the environment of, hey, am I really performing well or not? It's always good to have like some kind of checks with what's happening in the market, which is one thing which I always keep on which I always keep on even telling with a lot of my colleagues is always think of what's the strategic positioning that you have compared to anyone else, which is if you are easily replaceable, probably you're not doing the right stuff. If you are not working on stuff where you can hands down say that, hey, I am the top expert in this field, bring me anyone, I can beat them in these concepts or in this understanding, you are probably not going to get that. So for me, whenever I used to have that feeling, I always used to say like, hey, oh, I am probably doing very good in like competition. So I have like some kind of global presence that, hey, I can prove that I'm very good expert here. I can speak the language, which probably I'm at very better communicator in terms of a typical standard data scientist. And hey, I can also do a lot of process management and change management like a typical McKinsey consultant. So those are the things that, while in India we are not taught a lot about celebrating things, which is, this is like a very funny story that every time whenever you actually have a conversation with any of Indian reports, they always think of like, hey, what can I improve? Hey, what can I improve? They are only in that improvement scope, but they actually have to step back and actually celebrate things like, hey, I actually did achieve a lot of things. The things that I ship have created multi-million-dollar impact. So I feel we should also celebrate that. If we don't celebrate that often or enough, we always have that syndrome saying like, hey, am I not good enough? So I feel that's the balance, which again, it's also like a cultural shift where from India, when you come to US, it's like, oh wow, this is the reason why that happens. So I feel the celebration is like important along with just having improve yourself.
Yeah, I guess it's really a great advice, right? The point you mentioned, like you should always know if you are easily replaceable or not, the work that you are doing, right? Because sometimes we get indulged or get too much comfortable in what we are doing that we forgot that everything is replaceable, right? So I think it's really a great advice for anyone listening or anyone who is starting their career. I think this can apply to anyone, right? At any point of their career, right? So thanks for sharing this. So is there any story as well that you like to share from your journey?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more like overall, probably a little bit of story plus strategy, right? While uh, eh, while in the current environment, everyone is like work, work, go aggressive. I feel you should always be mindful strategy, which is like, hey, uh, like have check-ins with yourself, like once in a year or once in a quarter, just to understand like where you're going, how you're going, and what needs to happen. The story is, I always see life more around like there are days where you're in a sprint, there are days when you're in a marathon. If you're in a place of nearly getting to a promotion cycle or any of those, you have to sprint as much as possible. After getting your promotion or after getting your any milestone that you have achieved, you should go into a marathon mode where you should not be running for speed, but rather you should be running for long term and longevity. So that's the direction that I would say. And for me, yeah, I always try to time things in more of those lens, whether that is like my shift within like McKinsey, where I moved from like India to US, or from there to Amazon, and from there to JPMorgan. Always have that extra lens of what is the strategic value that you're always bringing to the table. And if you're just going with the fly and going with the wind, which I think a lot of Indians do based on by design, because we have always thought like, hey, go to school, get your tuitions done, get your homework done, and then go to college, get your engineering, either engineering or doctor. So in a way, we have always been like in that streamlined path of like towards one direction, where I feel we need to have a lot of timely step back or check-in moments with personal self so that we are in the right trajectory. Otherwise, it will be like a after 5 years down, you will be like, why am I in this place? Like, did I plan this or did it just happen it by a flow?
Yeah, I guess that's really make a lot of sense. And I can easily resonate to what you are saying because I've been to this field and I know how the things works and how people think around it, right? So is this the same advice that you follow in your life? Is there any other advice as well that you like to share with us? One advice that you keep telling yourself or one
For
thought?
me,
Yeah.
I think the sprint and marathon is something that I always keep in mind and having like a frequent check-ins. And the one piece of advice that if I have to give in the current environment, the biggest and the most important thing is the AI wave is coming. There is no question of it. It's like an inevitable one. If you are not thinking strategically, which is like, hey, what is the strategic value that I'm bringing to the table, you will be very quickly replaced. And in order to answer this, I know I'm use the word strategy quite a lot because of my McKinsey experience. But when I say strategy, you don't have to be like, hey, let's build an end to end, or let's do a lot of thinking, research to do that. But you just have to step back and think like, hey, what is my value within my own team? Which is, you don't have to complicate. Within my own team, what's my value? And across all my multiple years in my career, what are the things that I have done which places me unique in terms of the positioning? And with AI coming in, if you are not in the top 1 percentile or top 20 percentile, you will be easily replaced. It's not AI which will replace, but it's clearly the expert, whoever is in the field, will be able to do 10 people's job. So AI will not replace you, but the person who is able to multiply his or her capability and his or her deliverable scope will actually replace you, because they can do like more things with the less time. So the only game that I would say is don't wait for it. Try to be on that top tier, top percentile, top decile of that whatever work you are doing. If you are laid back, disruption will come, which will probably not be a easy one to change. So rather than like do it in a reactive way, go ahead and be in a proactive way. So that's the main advice that I would say. It's more like that's the one that keeps me thinking or keeps me awake at night. It's like, hey, am I in the top decile enough where I will be robust if AI actually tries to replace a lot of things? So that's the constant thing that I kind of remind myself, and I kind of push all the people that I talk to. It's like, hey, what are you doing? Like, are you using Claude? What apps did you build? What's the business case around it? And do you have valid users or not? If you don't have valid users, it's totally fine. However, you need to know like what you're doing, why you're doing, so that you always be on that strategic advantage and in the top decile.
Yeah, I guess that's the main thing. And last but not the least, how do you keep yourself updated? Like one you mentioned, like having the circle and chatting around with those things. Is there any other source that you follow?
So I actually do quite a lot of, I follow a lot of blogs. Uh, it's more like you have to find, this is an advice even within your own organization, which is like, in any organization, when I join an organization, I try to look up like saying like, hey, who are the people within my leadership team, like the C executive or the executive leadership level, who I want to become in 3 years or 5 years time. And I kind of follow them and kind of have them kind of lay out. Uh, Andrew Karpathy's documents are something that I look at quite a lot. And lately, I I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn where they are like very good curators, as in like curate information from a lot of places. And I'm a big fan of GitHub awesome repos, awesome LLMs, awesome LLM ops, awesome Claude, awesome Claude bots. So once in a while, I just scan through like, hey, what are the new additions that have been added, and play around, do some experimentations. So that's like another source that I look at. And yeah, podcasts are like another thing. I follow a lot of Indian podcasters. Nikhil is like one of the people who I follow. Varun is like another one who I follow. Uh, yeah. So these are like the couple of few people, but I feel like the type of people change based on like what kind of content I want to consume. But these are like the curated list of podcasts, GitHub repos, couple of blog posts, and LinkedIn and Twitter.
That's great. So thank you so much, Omar, for sharing your insights. I hope it was great for you as well. And
No,
just
that's right.
keep inspiring us and thanks for the time.
Thank you, Utkarsh. Thank you for having me.